Content warning. This video will contain talk of racial discrimination, suicide, mental illness, gaslighting, as well as depictions of unhealthy relationships and graphic violence. So, good times for all involved. Hey there, my fire starters. How are you holding up? Somehow this thing just slipped past me, with the whole world burning down around us. So I figured now that we're a good 7 months past when it should have come out, it's as good a time as any for me to unveil the films that have stuck with me since seeing them in 2019. Now I always need to throw this up at the front. These are films that I saw for the first time in 2019. In the past, these have included movies from up to 3 decades ago. Last year, my favorite film seen was The Exorcist 3 from 1990.
It's the smiles that keep us going, don't you think? The little giggles and bits of good cheer.
The only real qualifier is that it had to be my first time seeing the film in its entirety. So, everything else is game. Anyway, that was the original plan for this list, and it is up to a point. Frankly, I kind of lost my way in the bottom half of the list, unable to really come up with a concrete bottom 4. Like, it all could just slip around and I had no feelings for or against any of the films. I even tried rewatching several of the films only to kind of go, on where to place them or even if I had anything to say about them in the first place. This was a first for me. So after an itsy bitsy teeny little almost inaudible existential crisis, I decided we'd do a twofer. My top 5 favorite films seen in 2019 and 5 interesting films seen in 2019. The films that you're going to see in this video are not so seated in my mind that I want to continually watch them, but they do have things that I want to talk about. I have opinions. I want to thank my patrons Chris Markinson, Stormy OK, and David Ferguson. Thank you for your continued support. So now let's jump into my new 2 completely separate and in no way a cop-out 2019 year-end lists. Oh, my name is Justin D. Hurd, and this is Dubious Consumption. Now that we're diving into the 2 lists, just a reminder. This is stuff I saw in 2019, no matter its original release date. It's not too bad this year, all things considered, but I gotta make sure I cross those T's. So let's dive in. Now, in no particular order, my first pick for an interesting film to check out is Apostle 2018. Somehow this got shuffled around in my brain after Midsummer came out. They have a similar backbone, but this one is a lot darker and deeply upsetting. It took me multiple viewings before I realized how fucked Midsummer was. Apostle, with a similar story of an outsider entering a functioning cult and being destroyed in the process, left so much of an impression that my overwhelming thought was, I'm not ready to watch that again. Set in 1905, Apostle is the latest feature film from Gareth Evans, the director of the Raid films. This is an intense movie, filmed so modernly that I forgot that it was a period film. In my defense, the majority of the film takes place on a remote island and could very easily fit in that Amish-style storyline. The lead actor, Dan Stevens, is always at an 11, even when the film is at a 3. However, the two do eventually meet at his incredibly high intensity. And it's all the more glorious for it. The film cribs liberally from Martin Scorsese, specifically Gangs of New York and Shutter Island. At times, it plays like the greatest hits as things line up, but in others, it blazes its own path. I love the goddess of the island, bloated off of the blood of humans. It's a darkly sinister take on the genre, with the cult chaining up and gorging the actual god they worship. The only part that makes me cringe and actively dislike the film is the Romeo and Juliet subplot with Jeremy and Fionn. Early on in the film, they slip out at night to hang out, which ends up in sex initiated by Fionn. A little background here. Fionn's mother died from childbirth, and her father is creepily interested in her, even spying on her in the outhouse. So with that in mind, Fionn finds out she's pregnant and attempts to leave the island with Jeremy, who she's madly in love with. Her father steps in and in his rage, murders her. Then he frames Jeremy and purifies him in the slowest and worst way possible. The worst way. This movie fucked me up. For some reason, though, it bled out of my mind by the time its sister-in-arms Midsummer hit theaters. The only other issue I have with the film is the way it's shot. It's highly choreographed during the fight scenes, as would be expected.
For king and country!
And has a lot of interesting shot choices, but it all feels so modern. It really does take away from the feel of the world. By the end of the plot, most of the main characters are dead, and like 30 Days of Night, our main character has sacrificed his humanity in his effort to save his loved one. It truly is a striking image to see the island exploding in blood as everything comes apart. This movie is not an easy watch for many reasons, and it is as intense as they come. But if you're looking for a dark foray into cult culture, check this one out. Mandy, 2018. Panos Cosmatos is a fascinating figure. His father, George P. Cosmatos, is the director of one of the most iconic westerns, Tombstone. Yes, that Tombstone.
Does this mean we're not friends anymore? You know, Ed, if I thought you weren't my friend, I just don't think I could bear it.
As a result, Panos' first movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow, was entirely funded by the DVD residuals from Tombstone. That film is weird, to say the least. It is a broken film that is mostly built on visuals and atmosphere. His follow-up, Mandy, is that times 1,000%. This is an uncompromising vision that takes a relatively simple revenge story and amps up the atmosphere to the point that sometimes it's an overwhelming force, weighing you down. Colors are tweaked so much that the scenes drown in it. The movie itself is a kaleidoscope of imagery straight out of heavy metal. I love its vibe of just being a metal album cover. That type of dedication to an aesthetic that does more to sell the world than anything else in the movie does. Mandy is about the music, the feel, the form, the factor. The medium is the message. Now, all I've said so far sounds like a negative, but to be honest, this is an acid trip of the Pink Floyd variety. It's amazing to watch, to try to parse how exactly they did that, but this is totally ignoring the story so far. The film is a play on Mad Max or RoboCop, about a man living a happy existence only for an outside gang to step in and destroy everything around him. Red and Mandy live a quiet life in the forest, a perfectly happy couple that have their own style of banter that we can't quite grasp why they find it so funny.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Eric Estrada.
Eric Estrada who?
Eric Estrada from Chips.
One day, Mandy is out walking when a Christian cult in a van crosses their path. The leader, Jeremiah Sands, fixates on Mandy and six his followers on her. Let's just say things turn bad very quickly. Just to give you an idea of what you're in for. Nicolas Cage, completely unhinged, forges his own axe. At one point, there's a chainsaw fight. You get to see Batman Begins Thomas Wayne full frontal while on the biggest dose of hallucinogens. There are acid trip bikers that look like off-brand Cenobites from Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth, but in the best way possible. Get this. These crazy evil creatures are summoned by the Horn of Abraxas and require one of the members of the cult to be sacrificed, as well as a giant jar of goopy LSD. They are insane, weird, and broken. Just the way I like them. Queen and Slim 2019 is about two people on their way home from a horrendous first date, only to be pulled over by a cop. While trying to figure out exactly what they got pulled over for, the situation escalates and the cop ends up dead. The two decide to run and escape the country. What follows is a Thelma and Louise style road trip movie where the two main characters learn to understand and even love one another as they're running for their lives. Did I mention that they do not like each other? I'm not going to say this is one of the best movies I've seen, but it definitely has its own style and viewpoint. I was already a fan of Daniel Kaluuya from both Get Out and Black Panther. I didn't know Jodie Turner-Smith, but this film definitely piqued my interest, and I immediately watched Sci-Fi's Night Flyers after seeing this film, which was her first role. One of my favorite books and series is Brent Weeks' The Way of the Shadows. Trust me, this ties back in. The book itself is set in a world where assassins are trained in both combat and magic. The story focuses on a character named Azov, who does everything he can to be trained as one of these assassins. As part of his conditioning and future, he is given a new name, Kyler Stern, and is taught to be a noble. To be completely honest, I had to look up his original name for this piece because I couldn't remember it. He is so perfectly represented as Kyler in my brain for this and the rest of the books that I just forgot who he was. All this to say, it's one of the few pieces of media that successfully renamed a character, changed what they represented, and it was seamless. That is, until Queen and Slim. The titular characters are never referred to as such in the actual film. They do not like each other even on their first attempt at a date. Instead, they are almost at each other's throats. However, once they are on the run, they start to grow on one another. The entire journey takes place over the course of a few days. During that time, the characters completely change their appearance, get to see both the best and worst of humanity, and become mythical figures in the process. One of my favorite moments is when Slim takes Queen to a local bar to dance, regardless of the danger that represents. They're immediately clocked, but are able to spend the night dancing without fear of being turned in. While they're dancing, we start to hear an internal dialogue between the two, as if they're finally connecting. It's the first time it happens.
We should go.
It's not the last. On its face, I really like the idea and its general execution. If they had kept it between these two outlaws and the silent communication as they become closer, I think it would have been a perfect fit for the story. Unfortunately, they start using it to create these tableaus between multiple characters to represent their internal desires, the things that they're too weak to say.
I want to be immortal too.
You're too young to be worried about all that.
I want people to know I was here.
As long as your family knows you were here, that's all that matters.
Maybe that's what they were getting at before, but I read it differently and it just cheapened the effect for me. Regardless, the movie has ingrained itself in my brain, and I would definitely recommend it despite its fumbles.
Can I be your legacy?
You already are.
The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, 2019. God damn, it's good to see Terry Gilliam back on his game. I grew up watching the guy, not even counting his time with Monty Python. Time Bandits was a staple of my family, even though it's one of the most chaotic fever dreams I ever remember witnessing. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen had also crept up, specifically for Robin Williams' turn as King of the Moon.
I'm sorry, you must refer to me by my complete title, King of Everything. Re di tutto, but you may call me Ray. You know, the moon is a very insignificant part of my domain now. There is so much more.
I wouldn't necessarily say I've got a contentious relationship with Gilliam, but I do think that Heath Ledger's death really did a number on the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. I had high hopes for that movie, only to see it kind of devolve into a CG mess, even as they tried to restructure the story to finish it and honor Heath Ledger in the process. The closest I think Gilliam has got to recapturing his old magic was with The Zero Theorem, which admittedly was his last movie in 2013. However, I do think we lost him in the aughts to digital manipulation. Gilliam's earlier work seemed to have really been driven by that tactile sense of controlled chaos. The entire vibe of Brazil is that it's a barely functioning society that has just grown wildly out of control, with all the ductwork and the modern excesses taking over. I am delighted to say this grimy madness returns in The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. While the film starts out with old-school over-the-top Gilliam set design, it's not until he discovers the dilapidated trailer home displaying the raving shoemaker who thinks he is a modern-day Don Quixote that we really get a feel for the weirdness we're about to discover. The story itself is about a director who's making a big-budget version of Don Quixote, but is having trouble with inspiration. He is cheating with his boss's wife, and is almost caught one night after finding his original version of Don Quixote from when he was first starting out. This sends him on a spiral to find the old town and the love he left behind, seeing how his careless disregard for this village and the people in it destroyed so many lives. Throughout the film, Adam Driver is in a constant manic state, as he tries to control everything around him, all the while following the transcendent Jonathan Pryce. The film plays with what's real and what's not throughout. One of the things I absolutely love about it is that the magical realism seeps into the real world. Events that seem so far out of the scope of reality that we shouldn't question them become entangled in the real world of this film. For instance, a knight appears from the story to challenge Javier's Don Quixote, only for it to be revealed that it's the local townspeople trying to break Javier's lunacy. The last act plays entirely into this dichotomy, leading to the titular event and the ultimate reveal of what that means. With all the weirdness that this film contains, it is nothing in comparison to the epic levels of shit Gilliam went through trying to get it created. While I won't get into it here, suffice it to say he first started collecting funds to make this film in 1990. There was a documentary called Lost in La Mancha that focused on his failed attempt in 1998 to 2000 to make it with Johnny Depp as Toby, the character ultimately played by Adam Driver. It is worth watching just to see everything go wrong for him.
The horse about to move.
Come on, horse. Come on, horsey.
There's a large bunch of lightning about to hit us.
Yes!
He also tried to make the film in 2003, 5, 6, 8, 9, 2014, 15, and finally 16. Each of these were individual revivals, attempts with a constant revolving door of Bay actors being cast and thrown around. The script seems to have been written every year, as well as new concepts and ideas being churned through it. And even when it was done in 2017, there were still 2 years of legal battles to be fought over who actually had the rights and if this was a legitimate production in the first place, and whether the film could actually be distributed. He actually lost his deal with Amazon because of this. So, needless to say at this point, I am so damn pleased I got to see this film, and after all the years of hype, I absolutely loved it. There's another documentary coming out documenting the making of the completed film called He Dreams of Giants. I personally cannot wait. Glass, 2019. Before we talk about Glass, I just want to let you know I have to spoil its connection to 2 other M. Night Shyamalan films. If you do not know about them, please watch Split beforehand and then come back and watch this review. I don't know if I can actually recommend this film. Some of you may remember that I was ecstatic about Split. When I first finished the film, I sprinted, up 4 flights of stairs. Why did I do that? Well, I was energized by the movie. Split is a damn amazing film, and its last-minute reveal that it's part of the Unbreakable timeline, let's just say I was hyped about this film. For the uninitiated, Glass is the 3rd film in the East Row 177 trilogy. These films revolve around people in the normal world who have superhuman abilities that show up in the most unlikely of places. The first film, Unbreakable, was about David Dunn, a security officer going through a divorce who miraculously survives a train wreck without a scratch, even though every other person on the train was killed. He is then approached by a man, Mr. Glass, who believes that superheroes actually exist, that comics are metaphors for abilities people actually have. The film itself is about David slowly starting to believe, only to realize Mr. Glass has been creating these disasters to find David and is actually the equivalent of a supervillain. And the movie ends on that hell of a cliffhanger, in the year 2000. Split, the second film that came out in 2017, was a backdoor sequel. Up until the last few minutes, you had no idea it was even related. Instead, the film focused on 3 girls being kidnapped by a man with 23 distinct personalities. There is a fabled 24th personality called the Beast that several have begun to worship. One of the girls uses her wits to play the personalities against each other as she tries to escape. The Beast eventually manifests, completely changing Kevin's body, becoming a cannibalistic, voided-out monster that can climb walls. All this is a setup for Glass. David Dunn is hunting the serial killer known as the Horde. David's now called the Overseer by the media, and in his effort to catch the Horde, he is caught and imprisoned in the Raven Hill Memorial Mental Institute. Run by Dr. Ellie Staple, the institute is tailored to each of the superhumans: David Dunn, Kevin Wendell Crumb, and Elijah Price. She believes they are experiencing delusions of grandeur and aim to break their will. The things that capture my imagination about this film are the Overseer and the Horde's cages. In the case of David Dunn, it is rigged to drown him if he tries to escape. For the Horde, flashing lights force a personality change in Kevin if he even approaches the door. This allows James McAvoy to really stretch his acting skills that we have already seen a taste of in Split. Get this, he displays 20 of these 24 personalities, each separate and unique. It's an actor's dream job. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie doesn't quite live up to McAvoy's commitment. I don't think it has anything to do with Willis or Jackson either. Instead, I think this firmly rests on Shyamalan's shoulders. The story was just not grand enough for the ambition set up throughout the film. The climax is built up to be a giant terror attack by the titular Mr. Glass, centered around a new skyscraper in Philadelphia that will reveal superheroes to the world. This is an impetus for an epic escape and a no-holds-barred fight between the Overseer and the Horde. I was so damn excited! And then it all unravels. I really don't want to ruin it because there's a lot to like in this film, just not the last act reveal. Suffice it to say, the whole plot is a lot bigger and smaller than we originally thought, and it doesn't involve the 3 main characters moving into the future, if there even is one. Regardless of how it ends, I would still recommend this film, especially if you're a fan of Unbreakable and Split. Just don't expect a happy or even a particularly satisfying ending. Man, that does it for the first part of this list. These are definitely ones that should be checked out when you have a chance. They are the very definition of more interesting than good. I know the end of the world is happening around us, but please take the time to check out my Patreon. Even $1 a month can widely change things for me. Now for the next part of my list, my top 5 films seen in 2019.